welcome back. So today we're talking about Minari, probably one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. So this is a movie about what it means to be an American, a society with the perfect blend of self-delusion and ego to think they can succeed where others have failed. So the premise of the movie is about a Korean family who moves to Arkansas in pursuit of the American dream. And the performances in this film just had my heart. I could see my own experiences in each of these characters, not just in their mannerisms, but in their way of life. So kudos to just capturing a vibe, a feeling. And this is a movie that will really resonate with you, especially, you don't have to be an immigrant, but it's really just about family and trying to keep family together. So just to give you an idea of what it's about, Jacob, the father, moves his family to Arkansas. He buys 50 acres of land in hopes of kind of getting his family out of the cycle of debt and poverty. And the plan is to kind of cater to the Korean market. So with like 30,000 plus immigrants moving to America every year, he figures he has there's riches and niches. Unfortunately, this kind of pursuit of success and money nearly destroys his family. And the life of an immigrant is already uncertain enough. Especially if you're going to buy like cursed farmland. So this land he buys, the previous owner shot themselves because they just weren't really able to make it work. And before moving to Arkansas, they used to live in California, a place with obviously like a gateway city. So really, like gateway states. So certain cities like Los Angeles, New York, like very big cities, you have a lot of immigrants, and it's a lot easier to find community and find people that you connect with. But Jacob decides to move his family to the middle of nowhere in Arkansas. There's no community here, or if there is, it's very small. He moves them into a trailer, so a house with wheels, and his wife is just horrified. And the plan here is to build generational wealth. So to kind of articulate why I love this movie and the themes, I'm just going to touch on 3 different things. The first is generational wealth. Second is the struggle of being a second-generation immigrant, and the third is assimilation. So Jacob moves his family to Arkansas, again, to kind of go big or go home. So the thing about being an immigrant is that like your money is not your own. It's not as simple as like, oh, you move out and you make an income and you go to college. It's like you're always bleeding dry, like you're always giving back, right? Like you're always sending money home, you're always taking care of everybody. Like your money is not your own. So you really have to find a way to make more money, and the more money you have, the more ways you spend it. So he just kind of working these jobs is not enough, and this is something that Jacob sees, even though his family doesn't see it. And this kind of, struggle to create something new, but at the same time kind of respecting your past is articulated through this grandmother figure. So he moves his family to Arkansas, and they are not having it. And to try and relieve tension, Jacob kind of says, okay, why don't you bring your mother? So he tells his wife, bring your mother. So the grandmother comes, and this grandmother is pretty much every second-generation immigrant's nightmare. Like, she is fully Korean. She comes to visit the family to help take care of the kids. Of course, she doesn't speak a word of English. And, the thing is, like, this kind of tension between the old and the new is also played out really nicely in their son David. I believe his name is David, correct me if I'm wrong. So the grandmother comes and everybody's greeting her except for this kid. Like, this kid wants nothing to do with her. He's embarrassed. He's like, you're not a real grandmother. Like, this kid is hella disrespectful. The things he says to her, watching this kid grow up, I don't know, if there's any immigrants watching or people, you're gonna get your ass beat and you deserve it. Like, the things he was saying to her, he says she smells like Korea. He's just disgusted by this woman. And the fear of being like a second generation immigrant, especially if you have parents that don't speak English very well, is that you're going to be found out. Like, you don't want people to find out you're not from around here. And that's something I can totally relate to. And your family is the thing that exposes the shit out of you. So watching him be super disrespectful and just watching the contrast between the parents who are just kind of learning English, trying to figure everything out. This grandmother who just doesn't care. And this grandmother figure is really funny because she does assimilate quite nicely. Like, she ends up kind of drinking the soda pop and watching television and getting used to it. But she never takes it too seriously, right? She's like, you're Korean. You know what I mean? Like, did you forget that you're Korean? Like this is not serious for her. And the less serious she takes it, the more angry this kid gets. Like, are you making fun of me, and this and that. And it's just, what ends up happening, especially to children that have parents that just kind of move to the country, is that you end up struggling with assimilation. Like, as ideally you want the two cultures to come together, but what ends up happening is it creates this like duality where you're either one person around your family and like a totally different person around other people. So you'll be at home, you'll speak the language, you'll eat the food, you'll do all that, and then when you leave, you're like in a suit. And so the problem with assimilation, and what this movie shows, is like one identity ends up like destroying the other, and it seems like they can't really be in balance, right? Like, it takes some time for the grandmother and the kids to kind of find equilibrium where they kind of understand each other instead of just trying to like shun each other. And it got me thinking, like, what is the proper way to assimilate? Like, what is, like, you end up having all these identity crises, and this is something that I struggle with. Like, you end up being so like whitewashed. Like, this kid is so whitewashed. Like, the things that comes out of his mouth, like, it's like, I get it. At the same time, like, you want to slap him, like hello, he's just so embarrassed by his culture. And I think a really good analogy was like the title of this film, Minari. So this grandmother introduces this. Minari is basically a seed that can grow. It's a pretty resilient seed, I guess, that can grow anywhere. Doesn't matter the environment. And it's the grandmother who kind of introduces this into the environment. And this was like a really beautiful analogy in terms of like, you're able to kind of carve out your own past without destroying like half of you. And in the end, like, everything has consequences, right? And one of the most, I think this movie, just in terms of like family and family dynamics and how hard it is and how uncertain it is to move to a country where your family is literally your nuclear family, right? Like, it's bad enough you don't look like everybody else, but now you got to figure out a way to at least act like everyone else. And this is like the most stressful thing. And so you see all this tension in the family and this marriage, and a lot of marriages, especially with immigrants, like I can only speak for myself, they don't work out. Like, my parents didn't work out. Like, you have all this optimism, like Jacob and his wife, like, they were in love, like, and the optimism and the hope, it's the hope that gets you out of bed, ends up being kind of belittles the reality, right? And yeah, life is hard in Korea, but life is hard in America too, right? Like, you kind of come to this place and you think it's endless opportunities, and it's not. It's really not. And the shock of it can be really disheartening. And each partner is kind of looking at the other like, you promised to make this work, and you promised. And I think there's nothing more tragic than losing faith in your partner. Like, there's nothing more disheartening than losing faith in your partner when you've kind of already lost faith in the place that you hope would be a new start, right? And their marriage, almost breaks apart. And this part was really sad because you see, right, like, the wife doesn't like this place. She thinks it's a hillbilly town. Like, this is not what we came, thousands of miles for. And he's like, that's not really the point. Like, we need to suffer a bit so our kids can be successful. And that's the thing, this like endless pursuit of success kind of kills you to the point where that's all that matters. And this is a very traditional dynamic. Like, the father just really cares about money, and he feels like he's doing his job as long as he's making the family money. And the wife is just feeling kind of like left out and sad, and it's not that it's not as important. It just seems to get to a point where you're living in the same house and you don't know each other. And for a lot of people, that ends up in divorce. And so this dynamic really like got to me because I could see it, and I've seen it before, and I don't know how they captured this. I don't know like how they communicated this, but watching this film, I'm like, this is really, you don't have to be a Korean immigrant to understand this. Like, any immigrant watching this, or just anybody who has friends that, like, this movie explains a lot about different people you might know. And I think the thing about marriage and family and the way this movie articulates is that you can have the same vision, right? Like, for him, he needs to be successful at something. He needs to see his kids like go to college and do all this stuff. And for her, she like, you just need to be a good dad, right? Like, the parenting just falls on the mom, and they both have the same vision and they both have the same dream. They just have different ways of getting there. And this is what kind of kills people. So in the end, what is home? Like, honestly, home, as someone who's traveled quite a bit at this point, home is where the heart is. It's the place where you invest time, energy, community. It's the place where you kind of, it's not just about money, it's like a mental state. And home can be anywhere. And you know, when I started traveling and when I started going to different places, like that was the attempt. Like I'm gonna find a place that's me, you know. And if it doesn't fit, like there has to be a place where I fit, right? And the more I travel, I realize no such place actually exists. It just really is the place where your family's there and you can be content. You know what I mean? Like it's not just about generational wealth, but it's about a place where you feel like home. Like have you ever gone into someone's apartment or house and you feel like everything is there for a reason? Like this is somebody's home, like this is somebody's like place, and this is really it doesn't matter where you are, you know. And I like how it articulated that. I also like this analogy of the Minari, because in the end it's this crazy grandmother and her seeds that ends up kind of salvaging the family. And what that says to me is a lot of immigrants, like I'm generalizing, but this is something I struggle with, so I'm going to say me. What happens is like you try so hard to fit in, and you try so hard, you do all the things, and you know the whitewashing is still something I'm struggling with. But what you don't realize is, you know, you have all these advantages and you have this knowledge that other people in your new community don't possess. And that's something that you should take advantage of instead of trying to eliminate and erase your history because you're embarrassed or ashamed by it, or you don't want it to be a hindrance, or whatever it is, like whatever stigma that is so inherent in like the second generation mind. So yeah, in the end, it's like the thing that makes you different is actually the thing that is going to help you succeed. And if not for yourself, but for the people around you. And so this was a beautiful movie. Again, the life of a second generation immigrant, like my kids will be lucky because at least they have me. But you know, when you're kind of the first person to do all these things, when you're kind of going back and forth between two worlds, like that's what this movie articulated very nicely, like what it feels like to kind of be going back and forth. And that's the thing about assimilation. It's like ideally you want this balance, but what ends up happening is the whole thing just kind of becomes disjointed and you end up having like this identity crisis. And so I could go on and on about this movie, but I would advise you to watch it. Focus on it. Like it really is a beautiful movie. Like it's slower paced, but this is like for me what it means to be an immigrant. Like just the uncertainty, the hope, the just the unsettling, like the constant starting over. That's the thing about being an immigrant. You're always starting over, you know what I mean? Like, and you're hoping that all this work is going to pay off and that your kids don't have to start over. And so it really is a struggle, and you feel like you're always wearing a mask, and you're always kind of like, you know, who you are around one person isn't who you are around other people, and just the different kind of nuances and dynamics. I don't know how this movie captured it, but it did. And so it's a beautiful movie, and I hope you all just take the time to watch it. It deserves to be heard. It deserves to be seen. And that's all I have to say. So until next time, peace.